Hi there, guys. Welcome to the Brazilian Expat. I hope you're all doing fantastic. Now, before we begin, I just want to share a little story with you.
Vai dar certo, vai dar certo, vai dar certo, vai dar certo.
If you live in Brazil or have spent a significant time in Brazil already, then you probably heard the very famous expression, vai dar certo. And you probably already heard this 1,000 times, several times a day. And for those of you who don't speak Portuguese, what vai dar certo basically means is everything is gonna be okay. Now, I've been living in Brazil for just about 18 years now. And it wasn't until 2021 when I started hearing the expression vai dar certo on a daily basis, several times a day. And for those of you who don't remember or probably want to forget, then 2021, that's when we all were in a global pandemic. Now in 2021, basically all of the posts on the social media had the hashtag vai dar certo attached to it. And it's quite interesting, the story behind where this hashtag or where this expression actually originated from. And after doing some research, I actually found out that one of the biggest private hospitals in the city of Fortaleza, very close to where I live in the northeastern part of Brazil, was actually the creator of this expression or the hashtag vai dar certo. Now, the hospital that we are talking about is called Unimed. And in the very beginning of the pandemic, of course, the vaccines, they weren't created yet. There was a lot of uncertainty about the type of disease that we were dealing with. And of course, people were afraid and just longing for information. So what the hospital Unimed, what they did is they created a campaign with the hashtag vai dar certo.
Vai dar certo. Não poderia começar essa mensagem de outro jeito. Uma frase que não foi planejada. Porque ela não veio da cabeça, veio do coração.
And they ran this campaign all over the social medias and of course on the biggest channels on the television, just with the message that everything is gonna be okay, everything is gonna be all right. And of course, the hashtag vai dar certo, it just exploded and just took off. Everybody was using the hashtag vai dar certo on their post on the social media. So in regards to that, of course, their campaign was a huge success and I'm pretty sure they were pretty happy with their marketing. Now, fast forward to 2024, the pandemic is far behind us. However, the expression vai dar certo is still going strong. Now, not so much on the social media anymore. However, it is still being, in my opinion, overused in our daily conversations. And vai dar certo has become basically an answer for everything. So I hope you enjoyed that story. We'll come back to that a little bit later in the video. My name is Andreas, I am Norwegian and moved down here to Brazil in 2006 to start a new life in a place that I do consider to be paradise. My biggest passion is kitesurfing, but I have also opened up a business, a bed and breakfast here, where I cater to both the locals and international travelers who want to experience this wonderful part of the world. Welcome to the Brazilian Expat. So in today's video, I want to collaborate a little bit about what has been going on in my life these last couple of months, especially in my business that I've been running for just over 10 years. But I also want to talk about all of the challenges and the frustrations that you will probably face if you ever decide to move to Brazil, open up a business, or just simply retire here. So needless to say, there's going to be a lot to talk about in this video, but if you have a look in the description, there are timestamps where you can jump straight ahead to the parts that really interest you the most, so you don't have to watch the entire video if you don't want to. Now, another important thing that I want to mention is that my latest upload to my YouTube channel was done over 3 months ago, and I am fully aware that this is not really good enough if you want to make a successful YouTube channel. Now, also keep in mind that I am still in the very early stages. I am learning a lot of how to produce good content. My editing skills are also improving for every video that I upload, but of course 3 months is a very long time without uploading a single video to my channel. I do apologize for this, but of course there is a reason for it. It's not because I'm lazy. Much on the contrary, I would really much like to produce more frequent content to my YouTube channel. However, there are just so many things that have been going on these last couple of months where it has been virtually impossible to sit down and even think about making any content for my channel. Now, by running a business in Brazil, you're always going to face some issues, some problems that need to be resolved from time to time. However, these last couple of months, it just seems like all of the issues, all of the problems, they just came crashing down at the very same time. And it's put a big strain on me, both physically and psychologically. And it's just mentally, I'm just pretty much drained. But that being said, all of these issues, everything that's been going on, that is also the inspiration for the topic on today's video. And that is exactly what I want to collaborate on. Is if you ever do decide to move to Brazil, then just be aware that a lot of what I'm going to be talking on today's video is also something that you will probably face whenever you decide to move to Brazil. But before we start, I really want to introduce myself. So my name is Andreas, I'm born in Norway, and I moved to Brazil in 2006, where I actually bought a piece of land and started to construct what is now my business, a bed and breakfast, which is located just an hour's drive outside the big city of Fortaleza in the northeastern part of Brazil. And the piece of land that I bought was exactly that. It was just a piece of land. My entire business was constructed from scratch. However, it is important to note that I didn't build everything at once. Everything was constructed in stages over several years. Because owning and running a bed and breakfast was really never my dream when I moved to Brazil. It is just an idea that evolved over the years. And also, it is very important to note, when I first moved to Brazil, I had absolutely no clue how to run a bed and breakfast. And of course, opening up a business in a foreign country is also a little bit daunting. And Brazil is one of those countries that is well known to be one of those countries that is extremely difficult for any foreigner to invest and do business in, just because of the sheer amount of bureaucracy, but also because of the work culture between the locals. So in my case, what I did, instead of going all in and constructing everything at once, we only basically started off with 4 rooms. We tried to test the waters just to see what would work and what wouldn't work, but it didn't take long until we saw a potential, and there definitely was a demand in the city where we were located. So after a while, we slowly started to construct more rooms and just expanded the bed and breakfast as the years went on by. So from when I opened my doors to my business roughly 10 years ago until today, we've been constantly improving and upgrading the bed and breakfast. And fast forward until roughly 3 months ago, where I uploaded my last video, I was talking about the tragic flooding that occurred down in the south of Brazil, mainly around the city of Porto Alegre. Now, what happened there was that they received an annual rainfall within a couple of weeks, and this resulted into massive flooding. Now, Porto Alegre is a relatively large city with just over 1 million inhabitants. And also what happened is that hundreds of thousands of families had to be relocated. They basically had to move out of their homes as the homes were underwater and had been flooded. So it's just a complete tragic disaster what happened down there. Now, Brazil is a huge country. Porto Alegre, the city of Porto Alegre, is all the way in the south. Where I live is all the way up in the northern part of Brazil. And where I live, we also have the rainy and dry season. Now, the dry season usually lasts from the end of May until the end of February, and from the beginning of March until the end of April, we do see a lot of rain. However, it's nowhere near what they saw in the south of Brazil. But I do feel that this year we saw an extraordinary amounts of rainfall. And of course, every single year, this does affect my business in a negative way. So one of the issues that we have during the rainy season is all of this rains, it just wears on the exterior paintwork of the building. Now, this isn't a huge issue because you can just basically paint the entire exterior of the building every single year, and I've just accepted that this is just how it's gonna be. Now, on a positive note, before the high season starts, the entire bed and breakfast has a fresh coat of paint and everything looks new and fresh. Now, some of the more serious issues that we face during the rainy seasons are power outages. Now, this is because of the poor infrastructure that we have here in Brazil, and when it really rains hard, usually you'll see a power outage every single time. Now, these power outages, they can last from a few minutes until the entire day. You don't really know when it's gonna come back, and it is really unfortunate because during the low season, we are really dependent on the few reservations that we get. And of course, the guest will not have a pleasant experience without electricity. It is Brazil, it is a tropical place, it is extremely hot, humid, so especially when we do have power outages during the night, it is extremely uncomfortable to sleep with all of the windows open, as there isn't a lot of wind either during the rainy season, and the humidity is extremely high and you get all the bugs and mosquitoes and so forth. And of course, it doesn't really help using a fan because there is no electricity. So it is a problem that we have every single year. The only positive note is that usually when we have power outages, it affects the entire city. So usually the guests, they will understand because it doesn't really help that they leave our business and try to go somewhere else, because our competitors, being a bed and breakfast or a hotel, they will face the exact same problem. Now, my biggest problem, and by far the most serious issue that I do have during the rainy season, is infiltration. Now, where our garage is located, where all of the guests park their cars, on the second floor, there is a big sun deck. Now, this is just basically a big concrete slab that is constructed on top of the garage, and there is a big sun deck on top of that. Unfortunately, it is not watertight, so when we do have the heavy rains, we get water seeping through. Now, this is something that I've been battling with ever since this was constructed. And obviously, it wasn't constructed very well. And every single year, I try to come up with new tricks just to get everything watertight. And I managed to improve it somewhat, but there is still moisture and water coming through. So you still have water seeping through and leaking into the garage. Now, unfortunately, this year, what I discovered is that some of this water coming through the concrete slab has come into contact with the iron rebar that is enforcing the entire structure. Now, this is extremely unfortunate because what happens is then when this iron rebar comes into contact with water, it will start to rust and rust will expand. And this also leads to cracking in the concrete. It is a huge issue and it's something that I need to address, and it's gonna cost me a lot of money. But I can't simply repair the cracks without actually attacking the root of the problem, which is infiltration. So I've already been trying to get a hold of some engineers to try to figure a solution to the problem that is definitive. So I need to find a solution to make this concrete slab 100% waterproof, and then I can do the repairs to the cracks underneath. Now luckily, when this was constructed, it was constructed in a way it's over-dimensioned, because at the time that I was constructing this, the idea was to construct a second and a third floor, maybe some more apartments. So there is not a lot of weight on top of it. So there is not really a huge risk of anything starting to fail or fall down or anything like that. I'm quite confident that it will remain intact over several years to come, but of course it won't get better, and it is still something that I need to address fairly quickly. But as I mentioned earlier, the concrete slab, it wasn't constructed in a proper way, and this brings me kind of to my first point, where I mentioned early in the video that some of you guys are thinking about moving to Brazil. This is one of the issues that you're probably going to face, that even if you buy a house that's already built, you will never really know the state of the building or the house that you're purchasing. Now, most of the times it will be absolutely fine. However, there is no guarantee about the structural integrity of the building that you're purchasing, just because there really isn't any quality control here in Brazil. And there really isn't any requirements of quality control either. And what I mean by that is basically anybody can build a house and sell it onwards to another person. And unfortunately, what this means is that if you want to build anything here and you hire a so-called engineer, the title engineer basically doesn't mean anything, because in all probability he doesn't even have the proper education to build basically anything. It's all by experience. And what happens here is, usually when you contract somebody to build a house or build anything, then usually there will be something called a mestre da obra, which basically means he's basically the boss, the one who will supervise the work that's going to be done. And then you'll have a few masoneries with experience, and you'll have the helper, which is all the way on the bottom, and he's the guy who's carrying all the bricks. He's the guy who mixes the cement. He does all the hard labor. And from there on, they just work their way up. And basically, that is how they learn. That is how they gain the experience. And a lot of these guys who've been doing this for maybe several years, they come to a point where they feel confident enough to call them mestre da obra and start their own company and hire a few guys, assemble a team, and they'll offer to build a house for you or whatever. So it's really hard to get a hold of a certified engineer, an engineer who has the proper education. Most of the guys who do have this sort of education and just this sort of experience, they are already most likely contracted by the bigger companies who just build, bigger projects. I'm talking about like apartment buildings or supermarkets or whatever. The really serious companies, they will already have handpicked all of the guys with the proper experience and the education. Then unfortunately, you're gonna have to look for these, basically the guys who are still working the ladder and gaining their experience. You really will never know how much experience the guy has. And of course, you will never know if the guy is trustworthy. It's also really hard to negotiate a price, Labor cost here is relatively cheap, but there is a saying that cheap is always expensive, because in the end, if the guy really doesn't do a good job, it can look amazing when it's all done, but you'll pay for it in the next couple of years when, in my case, you find out that everything is leaking and the rebar is starting to rust and crack, and then you got all sorts of issues that you got to do. So in the end, this is gonna cost me just way more than if I'd find a good engineer who would just do it properly the first time. I'd rather pay the double the price for the guy who just to construct it correctly, that everything is fine, I don't need to worry about it. But unfortunately, at the time, I couldn't get hold of anybody, and this guy, he was actually recommended to me from another guy again, but of course it didn't work out. And another huge mistake that I made is that I actually negotiated the price where everything was included. That means that I don't have to worry about buying materials or cement or bricks or whatever. It's one fixed price and he will just deliver everything complete. But that is a big no-no here in Brazil, at least in my opinion, and I'll tell you why. Just because they will then operate on a budget. You give them a fixed price, it is very easy for them to use a little bit less cement, use a little bit less iron rebar, just try to maximize their profit as much as possible. And that is really, really dangerous, and it is something I highly recommend you never do. It is much better to contract somebody, the working hours, just the labor costs, negotiate a deal that this is what you will pay them when everything is done, and then you supply them with the materials, with the cement or whatever as the work progresses along. So that is the way to do it. And unfortunately, when I built this concrete slab, I negotiated a price where he was gonna deliver everything complete, done. And I'm 99% sure that this guy, when he came to the final stages, he was trying to maximize his profit, because the materials that you use to actually seal off like a cement slab like that is quite expensive, and it's a big area, it's a big sun deck, and of course he would have spent several thousand reais, just doing that properly by sealing everything properly. And when I did some investigation, I could see that there wasn't used, no sealant or whatsoever was used to seal off this sun deck, this concrete slab. So that is the reason it's leaking, and this is something that I gotta pay for now. Now, another huge headache that I've been dealing with these last couple of months is I'm renovating 2 bathrooms in 2 of my second biggest rooms at my bed and breakfast. Now, this is a project that I've been planning to do for several years now, and I've just put it off year after year after year, but this year I finally decided that I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna renovate these bathrooms. I'm gonna tear everything down and build everything new. Now, the reason that I want to do this is, for those of you who've been following me on my channel, about half a year ago, I uploaded a video explaining exactly what I wanted to do with these bathrooms. For those of you who haven't watched that video, I'm just going to explain what actually happened there. Is at the time the guy was constructing these apartments or these rooms, he ran out of a certain type of ceramic tile that was used to put on the floor and on the walls of the bathroom. Unfortunately, these ceramic tiles, it was impossible to get a hold of. And he had already mounted all of these tiles and he ran out. And for some reason, he was constructing the 2 bathrooms at the same time, which means that he actually put the tiles on the floor first in both of the bathrooms, and then he started on the wall. When he came roughly halfway up the wall on one side, then he called me and told me that we actually ran out of ceramic tiles. Of course, I was quite upset, because I told him, look, why didn't you just, if you had constructed 1 bathroom, done all of that, completed 1 bathroom first, then you'd have enough tiles to at least construct the one bathroom. It is very easy to calculate how many ceramic tiles that you've been using. And again, like I said, this is my own mistake, because when I contracted this guy, again, I negotiated a price where all the materials, everything was included. So again, this is something by experience is my fault. And like I said, don't do this, guys. Always just negotiate the work, the labor, and just pay for the materials yourself. Just buy all the materials for him. But anyways, I didn't want to waste time. I didn't want to waste more money just tearing everything down and buying new tiles, all new tiles, and doing it again. What I told him, and this is mistake number 2, is that just try to find the most similar tiles that you can find. Now, these tiles were they're not white, they're a little bit, got a shade of gray maybe, not like really white. I just told him, like, try to find something similar. It's got to be the same size and it's got to be similar color, and just complete the bathroom, and hopefully it won't be that noticeable. And of course that was mistake number 2, because this guy, he found some tiles that were totally different size, a different color. These were like white. The new tiles that he found, they were just like snow white in color and a little bit smaller, which just means that the seams, the space between the tiles, because they were smaller than original, then the space between the tiles was basically almost like half an inch, it just looks terrible. So in the end, of course, I wasn't really happy, but in the end, the high season was nearing, and we just had to get everything done and open up the rooms and just start to rent out and make some money. I've had always wanted to redo all of these bathrooms. So finally this year I decided to do it, but of course that also turned out to be a complete disaster. What happened this time? Well, for some reason during this period, ever since January, and it's still relevant as of today, there are a lot of people doing renovations at this time. There's a lot of construction going on. They're building a lot of houses, they're building apartments, and other people there, they got huge projects, big renovations going on. And unfortunately what this means is that it's really hard to get a hold of anybody to do any sort of work. You got to remember that for just renovating 2 bathrooms, 2 relatively small bathrooms, it's not really interesting for somebody who already has a bigger project where they're gonna make more money. It was really hard to find a hold of anybody to accept this project, but eventually I managed to negotiate a price, and this time, of course, I only negotiated the labor cost. What actually happened, and this is also something that you really need to be aware of, and this is it's a really bad practice, but it happens all the time here in Brazil. So what happens is a lot of these guys who are entrepreneurs who work for themselves, they have a team. What they usually do is that they will have several projects at the same time. Now, I was fully aware of this, and I told the guy, look, I want you to be there when the construction is going on and supervise so they do it correctly. And the guy, of course, reassured me, yeah, I'll be there, and there was no problem, no issues. Unfortunately, what I suspect happened is that when he already had started renovating my bathrooms, he got a deal with somebody else who had a bigger project. There was more money in it. So he basically left all of his helpers just doing the work at the bathroom. So basically he just explained to them exactly what had to be done and how it was going to be done. And then he actually left and was supervising a completely different job for a different client. So when I came to check up on the work, of course, everything was done incorrectly. I mean, it was a complete disaster. Everything, like the walls were crooked and the floor was crooked. Everything was just a mess. Of course, I took a bunch of photos. I sent them to him. I asked him what the hell is going on, and we need to start all over again. And this guy, he was actually blaming me and says, well, you didn't explain it to me properly, which of course is BS, because I've explained it to him like 10 times already. We went through every single detail before he started the work. So of course that was just an excuse. But anyways, what actually happened is, in the end, he did it 2 times. He got it wrong 2 times. And in the end, I said, just keep the money, just don't come back. I'm gonna sort this out my own way. We are already several months into the low season, and I haven't even started these bathrooms. And these rooms are already reserved for the high season. I already sold these rooms, and they are actually my more popular rooms, which I make the most money. These bring in the most revenue, these rooms. So it's a complete disaster if these are not open until these guests arrive. So I'm really pressed for time. Now I want to really tell you something else as well, and this is kind of important. What also happens a lot of the times, and this is kind of scary as well, because the guys who are really good, who have the experience, maybe they work like a helper for several years and then they climb the ladder. But you also have the guys who basically are self-taught. That means that they don't really have a lot of experience, or the experience that they have is just trial and error. And a lot of these guys, if you go on YouTube, there are, especially here in Brazil, there are thousands of tutorials about how to do anything. I mean, you can install your own solar system, you can do your own electrical work, you can do your own plumbing. I mean, anything that you can imagine, there is a tutorial on YouTube how to do it. And a lot of these guys, they've just been watching these tutorials and they are self-taught. A lot of these guys, they have absolutely no clue what they're doing. You just imagine doing any sort of electrical installation, just the danger of doing that if the guy is not experienced. However, that is so common here in Brazil that it's actually quite scary. But anyways, moving back to the bathrooms that we are renovating. Now at this time, I was really getting desperate. I was almost in a panic mode because I couldn't get a hold of anybody. And at this point, I really didn't trust anybody either. So what I figured is that if all of these other guys, if they can do the work and gain any sort of experience just watching YouTube tutorials, then I probably can do the same as well. So that is exactly what I did. I just started watching a ton of YouTube tutorials about bricklaying, mixing cement, all of that stuff. Now, it has to be said, I actually contacted some of my good Brazilian friends and asked them if they could give me some tips and help me out. And of course they did. I did have a little bit of help along the way. But anyways, I spent probably almost a week just watching YouTube tutorials and how to do everything. And I decided, okay, let's just crack on this and let's just try to get this done. The problem here was that when you try to do stuff in a hurry, that is when things kind of go south. And that is what happened basically the first day when I was tearing down a lot of these older ceramic tiles. Unfortunately, I managed to cut myself when I hit one of these ceramic tiles, and they break. Where it breaks, they're almost like a knife's edge. They're like shards, and one of these, it landed, hit my foot, and it was pretty much at the point where I needed to go to the hospital to get stitches. But again, at this time, when this happened, I was so furious, I was so angry with myself that I let this happen, that I just got some Band-Aid and just really wrapped it around. And I really shouldn't have done that, because that actually required me to see a doctor and get stitches. Because this was, every time I took off the bandage at night, it was still open and it would start bleeding again, and it was really bad. But me being stubborn and in desperate times, I just cracked on. So I had my foot all wrapped around in this bandage, And it did heal eventually, but you know, it was kind of unnecessary. So that's what happened. I just cracked on, and I tried and I tried, and eventually I sort of got it to I made it work somehow. It's quite incredible until the very last stage. Because this time I wasn't gonna have any ceramic tiles at the bathroom at all. It's all gonna be concrete. But of course, concrete also isn't impermeable, you know, it will absorb moisture. So you need to seal everything off. So what I decided to do is treat everything at the very end just with like a resin epoxy. So it makes everything watertight, and you also get that really glossy shine. This is quite common down here in Brazil. It looks awesome, it looks really nice. However, this is something that I didn't pick up when I was watching these tutorials, and that is the base of the concrete. On top of that, you actually put like acrylic putty on top of that, so it makes everything really smooth. And that putty, that actually needs up to a month. I'm talking 4 weeks to actually properly cure before you put this resin, because this resin is quite powerful stuff, and it will actually start to eat away at the putty if it's not properly cured. And of course, I just let it cure for a couple of days. I put this epoxy on, and everything basically turned into almost like a chewing gum. It was just like rubber, the entire floor. And at one point I thought it was dry. I stepped on it. When I lifted my foot up, you know, a big chunk of the floor would come up with it, and it was just a complete disaster. And of course, at this time I was just running around in circles, and just my head was racing because I got a ton of reservations for this room in just a couple of weeks, and it's like, what am I going to do now? I mean, this is like a complete disaster. And I was calling my friends and everything and trying to figure this out, and I was like, oh, what am I gonna do? And as I mentioned in the intro of my video, the answer that I get is
Vai dar tudo certo.
that is the solution to the problem. Like, in the end, everything's gonna be fine. But I guess they have a point, because at a certain point it will be okay, but of course at the time it didn't really help a lot. So at this point already I had a client. He was gonna come in just a couple of days, and I already knew that I'd lost this battle, so I had really no choice. But luckily I had one of the biggest rooms, the nicest room that we have at our bed and breakfast. So what I basically did, I just upgraded him to one of the bigger rooms. But of course I got a lot of reservations coming in after that, and I really didn't want to take a chance. So what actually happened is that I put on all of the epoxy, fixed up all of the floor, put the epoxy on, I put a big fan, and I just let it sit for an entire week with this fan on. And I just prayed to the higher powers above that it will be fine. In the end, one of the rooms was actually, it was fine. It was 2 days before we had one guest arriving in this room, and I tried to step on it. I turned on the shower, let it run, and it was perfect. And as you can see from the photos and the videos, I think the bathroom turned out really, really nice. In the end, it actually gives me a huge satisfaction just to see the final result and just see how beautiful everything became. You know, was it worth it? Well, sort of. Looking back, I now have the experience. I know if I'm gonna upgrade any other bathroom, I do have the confidence to do this myself. The other bathroom, I'm just gonna keep it closed, and I want this floor, this putty, I want it to cure completely. When I'm pretty sure that it's all cured, then I'm gonna put the epoxy on, and that room can be opened up as well. If you do ever decide to move to Brazil, then I highly recommend that you learn the basic skills of electric work and do some simple plumbing, some masonry, you know, bricklaying and mixing some cement. It's just for you to understand just how everything works. And maybe you don't want to do this yourself, that's absolutely fine. But if you have at least the basic knowledge of how things work, then it's easier for you to also do some quality control of the guys that you are hiring. Because like myself, when I first came to Brazil, I would hire all of these guys that did a crappy job that I have to redo again and again and again. And that is because I was totally clueless myself on how this is done. But now it's a little bit easier. It makes my life so much easier because I have this knowledge. So I know when these guys are not doing a proper job, and just having that little bit of knowledge about how everything works reassures you when you got somebody doing any work for you. Then you know when it's done properly, when it's done correctly, and when you need to step in and look, you need to do this again because in a couple of years this is gonna be a disaster. So that is just a tip from me, 18 years living here in Brazil. Like, if you do come here, spend some time, just learn how things work. So before I continue, I just want to say a few words to all of my Brazilian viewers, because I know for a fact that after I upload this video, I know that a lot of you are going to be offended by what I'm saying. And usually when I upload my videos, I usually get a few comments from my Brazilian viewers saying that, well, Andres, if Brazil is so terrible, if you don't like Brazil, then why don't you just go back to Norway? And usually, every single video that I upload, I usually get a few comments just like this. And I think that it is very unfortunate, because the reason you're getting offended, in my opinion, is solely because of the fact that YouTube does such a terrible job of translating everything from English to Portuguese. And I believe the fact that you're getting offended is just because you don't really understand what I'm saying. In my videos, like in this video, what I previously mentioned is that there are still good workers out there. They exist. I'm not saying that every single person does a terrible job. If you listen carefully, if you rewind, if you go back to what I previously mentioned, I mentioned that there are really good workers in Brazil that do a proper job. The problem is that all of these workers, they're almost impossible to get a hold of, because all of the big companies, they've contracted them already. They're working on the bigger projects where there's more money to be made. But for like a private project, you know, you want to do some renovations or home, it's a smaller project, then getting a really good worker to do that is really difficult. It's extremely hard to find a good worker that will do a good job, and something that you probably won't have to spend a ton of money on redoing everything in the future. That is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that every single Brazilian worker is terrible. So please, before you write these negative comments, then please go back and try to understand everything that I'm saying. And this is quite funny, because it is actually you guys who are making fun and complaining about the Brazilian work culture. Now, if you go on the social media, especially on Instagram, there are just thousands and thousands of videos, of reels, where you guys post like memes and make fun of the typical Brazilian worker and the work culture in Brazil. I actually found a post on Instagram. Everything that I've been talking about until now in this video, you guys sum it up in just under a minute. And I'm gonna show you this reel from Instagram. I'm gonna translate it for you. It is kind of funny, but it just confirms everything that I've said until now in this video. So just watch it. I'm gonna move over here so you guys, I'm gonna put it up on the screen here. So just watch, this is quite funny.
Pronto, o serviço aqui é o reboco. Vem quando? Para começar? Segunda-feira. Isso quer dizer que ele só vem daqui a 6 meses. Mas aqui eu vou gastar quanto para fazer dinheiro?
Esse vicinho aí você vai gastar pouco, pode ficar despreocupado.
Isso quer dizer que você vai gastar o que você tem, o que você não tem, e ainda vai precisar fazer o empréstimo. Mas isso aqui vai demorar quanto tempo para terminar?
Isso aqui é jogo rápido, entre 2 a 1 semana a gente termina tudo.
Isso quer dizer que sua obra vai demorar em torno de 6 meses a 1 ano. Agora me diga uma coisa, você vai pegar só essa obra aqui mesmo, né?
Pode ficar despreocupado, eu só pego outra obra quando terminar a sua, meu patrão.
Isso quer dizer que ele está trabalhando em 2 obras vai pegar a sua e durante a sua vai pegar mais duas obras.
And if you go on the social media, you'll just find thousands and thousands of videos just like this, where it's you Brazilians who are actually mocking the Brazilian work culture. And although it's a lot of this content is just extremely, I find it to be extremely funny, but it's also at the same time, it's kind of sad because it kind of, just imagine the guys who have put in the work, who are educated, who do a really good job. You know, it's not fair to them. They just get such a bad reputation. And what I find also is a lot of Brazilians, they don't value the good work that these workers do. The majority of Brazilians, they will already have the mindset that these guys are going to rip them off. They're going to come in late. They're going to do terrible work. The fact is that there are really good workers out there. They're just extremely hard to find. But before we continue on, I just want to show you this very last post. Just watch this post there.
Não, dá uma olhada num serviço desse, pessoal. O que é isso? Produto e mão de obra tem que ter qualidade, senão um vai comprometer o outro. De que adianta o cliente comprar um piso, um porcelanato de qualidade e dar na mão de um sujeito como esse para estar assentando? Com todo respeito aos pedreiros aí, o pessoal tem que se qualificar para fazer jus ao dinheiro dos outros, hein?
And I agree 100%, because basically you're gonna throw your money away if you buy the most expensive materials because you want to make your bathroom look really nice. But if the worker, if he's not qualified and if he does it incorrectly, you need to do it again, you know, you're just gonna spend a ton of money. You're gonna throw all your money out the window. And what he's basically saying at the very end is that the worker, he needs to value your business, the money that you're giving him. He needs to utilize that money and deliver a good service, a good product. But basically that's it. I mean, so for all of you Brazilian viewers who are watching this, before you post anything, just stop, try to understand everything that I'm saying. And in the end, just know that this is unfortunately how it is in Brazil, in your country, okay? I know there are good workers out there, but like I said, in my case, it was impossible to find. And unfortunately, with the bad workers, I do believe that, you know, I'm entitled to be a little upset. This just sums up these last couple of months. And what I can say is that I've been up roughly 5 o'clock every single morning. I've had my coffee, I've had my breakfast, and I've been working my butt off until 7 or 8 o'clock at night. In the weekends, unfortunately, I do have a girlfriend. She also requires my attention, and she's already not been very happy with me because I've been so busy. And even at night, I've just been exhausted, and I haven't had the time to cater to her in a way that she deserves as a girlfriend, because I do really love her, and I'm grateful to have her by my side. So I feel really guilty not being there for her during this time as well. But just, I hope you guys understand that, you know, I haven't prioritized this YouTube channel because these last couple of months has been a nightmare. And unfortunately, even my girlfriend, she's been telling me every single day, vai dar certo. Everything's gonna be all right. And even when she says it, I get frustrated because, well, it doesn't really help. It doesn't really solve my problem. But she just keeps on telling me, yeah, I know it doesn't solve the problem, but in the end, it's gonna be okay. And yeah, I guess she's kind of right. But, you know, at the point when you're in this situation and just hearing the words, because I hear this every single day from everybody I know, I try to get some advice, I try to get some help, and the only answer I get, well, I don't know, but vai dar certo, it's gonna be okay. So for me, it's kind of lost its magic, it's lost its meaning. But anyways, if you ever come to Brazil, just realize if you got an issue, if you got a problem, if they say vai dar certo, just smile and say, yeah, I probably will. Okay, guys, for all of my followers, I do apologize that it's been taking such a long time for me to upload any content, and I hope you guys forgive me. I hope you're all patient, because at one point or another, it's like I always say in all my videos, I want to make this work, and I love reading all of your comments, and I have no clue when the next video will be uploaded. Before I go, I don't know if you noticed the background here. I'm not in Brazil. I just came a couple of weeks ago to Norway, and look, this was a trip that was planned a long time ago. I'm here visiting my mother. Next week, my girlfriend, she's actually coming from Brazil over to visit me. It's gonna be her first time traveling outside of Brazil, so I'm quite excited for that. Hopefully the weather will be nice, because the weather here in Norway is really unpredictable. Yeah. But we're gonna spend a couple of weeks here, and then we'll go back to Brazil, and I got a ton of projects already waiting for me there, so for that reason I have no clue as to when my next video will be uploaded. But I hope this video was somewhat interesting, and hopefully you guys understand my situation. And again, I just want to say thanks for all your support. If you enjoyed this video, you know, a thumbs up, it's always appreciated, and hopefully it won't be long until I see you guys again with my next upload. Until then, stay safe, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye bye. Ciao, ciao.